Forget the intro, we need to talk. FC Barcelona have suffered one of the most humiliating results in their entire history in the course of the last few days, after they were annihilated 8-2 by Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarter-final. But that only tells part of the story on their demise in the last few years. There are so many deep-rooted problems within the fabric of the club, but this result is undoubtedly a culmination of a plethora of unresolved issues which have destroyed a great establishment of the footballing world. In my opinion, there are three main points which have brought us to a point where we are seeing a Germany versus Brazil Part 2 unfold before our very eyes, which I will run through during the course of this video. Those are, number one, the transfer policy which the club has implemented over the last 5 to 6 years, and the corollary of that, which is a steady decline in the productivity of La Masia, the club's academy. Number two, the team's over-reliance on Lionel Messi, which means he is more important than ever despite his dearth of leadership skills. And the category which all of these problems can file under, as well as a managerial strife, which I will also discuss in this video, a poor president with a lack of ambition and ideas for the future. Johan Cruyff must be turning in his grave. Here is, essentially, my autopsy on Barcelona's current situation. Transfers and La Masia. From the days of Cruyff being Barcelona manager, the Catalan giants have always prioritised their academy, La Masia, and promoting from within, meaning that a raft of young talent has come through into the first team. In the 1992 European Cup final, which they won, 4 of the players in the matchday squad came from the second team, or La Masia, which had increased to 7 by their 2006 Champions League triumph, 10 by 2009, and a staggering 11 in 2011. A crop which included the likes of Lionel Messi, Andres Iniesta, Xavi, Carles Puyol, Sergio Busquets, Pedro and Boyan. In a game against Levante in 2012, the entire team consisted of La Masia graduates, as was the manager, Tito Vilanova. The squad became settled and their policies in the transfer market worked, combining the graduates with a fresh new superstar each year, creating a hegemonic force in the Spanish and European game. In 2011 and 2012, La Masia graduates Cesc Fabregas and Jordi Alba both returned to the Camp Nou in those respective years. Neymar would arrive in 2013, welcomed to Catalonia by thousands of baying and excited fans, and in 2014 Luis Suarez came through the door, creating the MSN Trident that would go on to terrorise defences for 3 years. However, that combination is gone, and Barcelona have essentially tried to imitate their rivals in signing multiple Galacticos, such as Coutinho, Ousmane Dembele and Antoine Griezmann, each costing more than £100 million. Bear in mind that during the first Galacticos era, Real Madrid went without a trophy for 3 seasons between 2003 and 2006. All have tried and failed to replace Neymar, who grew tired of being in Messi's shadow and left for PSG after they triggered their release clause, which was originally put in place to detract any potential suitors from buying him. So much for overconfidence. Whilst, as I mentioned, they were buying superstars year upon year, they aren't as inward looking to find the next superstar from their academy as they once were. In that fateful game against Bayern, 5 starters were from La Masia, but all barring one were over 30, and that one was 28-year-old Sergio Roberto. And the only graduates from the bench to make it onto the pitch was 17-year-old Ansu Fati, who is tipped for big things, but he is the first, potentially alongside Riqui Puig, to have had bestowed upon him in over half a decade. Lionel Messi has said himself in 2018 that Barcelona have lost a bit of the commitment to their academy, and Manolo Marquez believes that the fans have now resorted to demanding immediate success as opposed to a rebuild, meaning that Barcelona have to supposedly spend big in order to keep up, whilst letting talented individuals and youngsters, including Eric Garcia for example, depart, since there is no longer a pathway into the first team, or at least a pathway like there was a decade ago. Of course, not everyone can match the standards set by Lionel Messi, who of course came through Barcelona's academy, but surely there are still some gems in the reserve side who are yet to be discovered. Juan Laporta, the ex-president of Barcelona, in response to Madrid splashing out a whopping £136 million on Cristiano Ronaldo and Kaká back in 2009, bragged, "We make Ballon d'Or, others buy them." But now it seems as though the roles have subsequently switched around, after Zidane, the Real Madrid manager, took inspiration from the Barcelona model, which Barcelona seem to have long abandoned themselves. It is the transfer of Thiago Alcantara, however, which perhaps surmises Barcelona's failings in the transfer market in recent times more than any other. He had originally been given a release clause of €90 million provided that he met a few stipulations, but Barcelona somehow neglected those stipulations to result in it dropping down to a bargain €18 million, which Bayern, under new manager Pep Guardiola, who had of course brought Thiago up from the Barcelona academy, were only too happy to pay. Thiago has gone on to be a linchpin in the Bayern midfield, winning the Bundesliga title in every single season he has been at the club. Thiago is meant to be Xavi's heir apparent, yet Barcelona let him slip out of their grasp, and subsequently their central midfield position has become, astoundingly, their problem position on the pitch. We've heard a lot of talk surrounding Manchester City's continued issues in defence and the money that they've spent trying to fix the gaps, but in my opinion, Barcelona's central midfield problem is less publicised but more brutal in terms of financial expenditure and wastage. Let me run you through the players who have come through the door who play in that position since 2014, just to prove my points. Ivan Rakitic, brought in to replace Xavi, signed for 18 million euros, and he has been a mainstay for 6 years, so therefore you could quantify him as a success. However, also incoming in 2014 was Alen Halilovic, who was tipped to be the Croatian Messi, but never made a first team appearance for the club. In 2015, Arda Turan came in for 34 million euros, but didn't suit the style and was frozen out of the team, sent out on loan to Istanbul Başakşehir, and given a suspended prison sentence for assaulting a singer in Turkey, then entering the hospital the singer was in with a gun and firing it on sight. In 2016, they brought back Denis Suarez, who made very little impression on the club, albeit they did only spend 3.25 million euros on him, as a result of that buyback clause which they inserted into his contract when he was sold to Villarreal. Andre Gomes, who was brought in from Valencia in the same summer for 35 million euros with a potential 20 million euros in add-ons, ended up being voted the worst signing of the season by Marca readers, and he wound up at Everton by 2018. 2017, an inexplicable trend started of signing middle-aged midfielders without really much sell-on value, starting with Paulinho for 40 million euros, who did originally impress but was sold back to China after just one season, albeit they made a profit on him. Philippe Coutinho was signed for a whopping 120 million euros, potentially rising to 160 million euros with add-ons. But he's enjoyed mixed fortunes, he was booed by his own fans, and of course he was sent out on loan to Bayern where, as we all probably know, he's just scored twice against the club who actually pay his wages. Arturo Vidal, continuing their proclivity of signing old midfielders, was brought in 2018 at the age of 31 for 18 million euros, but he was brutally exposed by Bayern on Friday night, and he now aged 33, meaning that he does not have a sell-on value whatsoever. Finally, Frenkie de Jong, who was brought in for 75 million euros, has been a mixed bag so far, but will no doubt improve. And the less said about Kevin Prince Boateng, the better. I did intentionally miss one player out in that list. Arthur. He came in for 31 million euros, touted as the heir to Iniesta, and despite impressing, he has been sold to Juventus, swapped for yet another middle-aged central midfielder in Miralem Pjanic, who was signed for a 60 million euro fee. Don't get me wrong, Pjanic is not a bad player at all, but he's only a short-term fix as opposed to a long-term plan. It would be akin to Barcelona swapping de Jong for Thomas Müller. Is Müller a good player? Undoubtedly, as we saw on Friday night. But he's 30 now and would have no sell-on value, whereas Frenkie de Jong is 22 or 23 and is only going to improve with time. As such, the move swapping Arthur and Pjanic doesn't really make any sense financially or for the long-term success of the club. In all, that amounts to a staggering 434 million euros on central midfielders since 2014, and they've ended up with only one success thus far in Rakitic, although I'm sure de Jong will also prove to be a success too, provided he isn't sold for some random 33-year-old midfielder who plays in China. Added to that, the extortionate fees spent on Dembele and Griezmann to try and find a replacement for Neymar, both of whom not hitting the same heights as the Brazilian, as well as Malcolm and Paco Alcacer, who cost 67 million euros cumulatively, but were gone within 2 years of their respective arrivals, and you find the inherent problem. It is money being spent for the sake of it, on players whom they don't really need, and it has led to uncontrollable debts, as well as the most expensive wage bill in the entire world, and the players demanding to bring Neymar back. It is worth bearing in mind that Messi was reportedly unhappy that the club signed Griezmann as opposed to the Brazilian. Speaking of the diminutive Argentine, over-reliance on Lionel Messi. Messi clearly has grown tired of the club, speaking out against them as the death knell on their title challenge this season was sounded, and, according to some reports, has now told Barcelona he wants to leave the club who nurtured him and the place he's called home for 20 years of his life. In spite of his massive wages, which top £1 million a week, he is often cut a frustrated figure at times at the Nou Camp, as was shown on Friday's game when, after losing the ball in the lead up to the 7th goal, he didn't so much as track back to retrieve the ball, only willing to contribute to the humiliation they were facing. The problem is that Barcelona view Messi as obviously their absolute key player, which is entirely understandable given that he is the greatest ever to play the game in my humble opinion. But he needs to be in a team where the pressure is not solely weighted on his shoulders. Take, for example, the Guardiola era, where Messi was obviously the star player, but frequently supplied by the likes of Dani Alves, Andres Iniesta, Xavi, and oftentimes Pedro. meaning that whilst there was pressure on him to perform, as there always is, it wasn't just that Barcelona were a one-man team and that the onus was solely on Messi himself. They were a unit coming together to create such an amazing force and a team which blew the world away. As a result of this, he flourished, improving year on year to eventually hit a whopping 73 goals in all competitions in 2011-2012 and 91 goals in the calendar year of 2012. Tata Martino's reign saw the onus almost solely on Messi, and it was his worst season for goals as a consequence of this for a while. But with the MSN trident under Enrique, Messi returned to his original heights as the goal-scoring burden was spread around the team, scoring and assisting with will as Barcelona went on to win 6 trophies in 3 years. It was, however, the image that Barcelona posted to their social media accounts after their 6-1 comeback win over PSG in the Champions League, with Messi depicted as a deity-esque figure as opposed to Neymar, who was the one who actually instigated the comeback, that certified the over-reliance on him, and, perhaps, led to Neymar's departure. After Neymar left, Messi was tasked with being the creative spark, goal scorer and leader of the team, especially after Iniesta's departure in 2018. But he isn't a natural leader. He doesn't have the commanding authority or personality that a Company or a Vidic did, or, when you compare them to their bitter rivals, a Sergio Ramos, for example. And he can't guide the team with his commands on the pitch as much as the club hope. Of course, he fulfilled the other roles with consummate ease, winning the European Golden Shoe in 2017-18 and 2018-19. But as Barcelona lost their leaders, so too did they lose their spine, and as a result of that, they became increasingly fragile in Europe. And their performances showed, as they bottled 2 3-goal leads in the space of 2 years, firstly against Roma, and then, most famously, or infamously of all, against Liverpool. They needed someone to take on Carles Puyol's role as the kind of leader and dominant force within the side, which could have gone to Gerard Piqué, himself also openly critical of the club's hierarchy and a prominent figure of pro-Catalan succession. But instead, they gave it to Messi, and the club has subsequently crumbled. All of the problems I've just mentioned, however, can perhaps be tied in with one thing and one thing only: the board. Or, to be more specific, Jose Maria Bartomeu, the club president. The hierarchy. At the end of the day, Bartomeu is the one who is overseeing this transition in ideology. He is the man behind the club's policy, and the one who has abandoned the incredible introspection in the club to solely look elsewhere, leading to unrest and discontent amongst many of his players. Their list of managers, too, is hardly inspirational, as Ernesto Valverde was the one who was chosen to replace the ultimately successful Luis Enrique, who had grown tired of the pressures of managing the club. Valverde was a man who didn't bring much inspiration to the Barcelona faithful, and after a good first season, progress stalled in his second, and then the club regressed in his third, leading to his sacking in January 2020. In his place came Quique Setién, who impressed managing Real Betis, but there were 2 problems with this. One, that he was 61 years old by this point, and clearly intended to only be there for a couple of seasons at max, which must have been Bartomeu's thinking behind this appointment, in which case I don't understand why he would go for this short term as opposed to long termism. 2, he was the club's 4th choice, behind Ronald Koeman and Mauricio Pochettino, and someone else, who I'll mention in a minute. Koeman is also nearing 60, and Pochettino has gone on record to say that he will never manage Barcelona as a result of his ties with Espanyol. At this moment in time, Setién is still in the job, but how on earth he's still in the job is beyond me, but the favourite to take over from him is Koeman, and, if the press are to be believed, he will only be there for a season to oversee this transition period in the club, before the man who was the 3rd manager, who could have been mentioned in the shortlist for Quique Setién's appointments, will turn up at Barcelona, as it seemingly is written in the stars for him to do so. That choice was of course their former player Xavi, currently managing Al Sadd in Qatar, a person who the club knows they need, but who is also playing hard to get, stating that he isn't ready for the job just yet. We all know that he will be the manager of Barcelona at some stage, and, as mentioned, whoever comes in to replace the untenable Setién will undoubtedly be nothing more than a stopgap. And that is the problem with Bartomeu's ideas. Most of Barcelona's transfers and managerial appointments have been nothing more than stopgaps, which, as you might have been able to tell, haven't really worked. The club can't deal in managers who will only stick around for 2 seasons at max before retiring. They need someone young, embedded in the club, and with new and fresh ideas who can stick around for a while to build a dynasty, a la Guardiola and Enrique. Furthermore, what Bartomeu has done to the academy is made La Masia a business as opposed to a farming ground for new talent, which it once was. Now, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, Barcelona's finances under his control have also been ruthlessly exposed, as the players needed to freeze their wages to prevent the spiralling debts from going out of hand, and they had to sell players from the Masía over the last few seasons to cover those debts too. There has been no evolution, but instead it is nothing more than mere aggression and backward steps, and Barcelona's frailties on and off the pitch were exposed by Bayern in the most brutal of manners. I do think that they will turn it around, as they so often seem to do, as Bartomeu will not survive the upcoming 2021 election, surely, and the new president will surely have to revamp the Masía, amongst other things. But for now, this is the Barcelona that we're going to have to get used to. Not like the fans will be interested though, they want to be challenging all the time and not care about a rebuild, but unfortunately for them, it might be what is necessary in order to return to the great heights of the Guardiola era, and of course, to some extent, the Enrique era as well. That concludes today's video on the autopsy of Barcelona. I hope you've enjoyed it to an extent. I do think they'll turn it around eventually, but obviously it might be a bit of time before that happens. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, comment with what you think of this whole situation, as well as of course other video ideas, and of course if they'll turn it around. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.